What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another week of NFL. This is officially week 4 of the NFL season, and this is the DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. Whether you play on DraftKings or FanDuel, you're not going to want to miss this video. We're going to cover core plays, we're going to talk stacks, we're going to talk defenses we want to attack with specific players, everything you need to be successful this weekend in NFL DFS. So if you're looking to profit, if you're looking to make some cash this weekend in DFS, you're not going to want to miss this video. Stay tuned. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Yo, hey guys, what's up, and welcome back here to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Welcome back to the video. Welcome back to the channel. As always, I thank you guys for tuning in here, spending some time with me as we talk NFL Week 4 DFS. Whether you play DraftKings or FanDuel, you know I've got you covered here. We're going to talk all the players that I like going into this weekend. Luckily, this is Saturday night, a little bit late for me to put out this video. But the good news is I've waited this long basically because of all the injuries that have occurred over this past week or from week 3. There's a lot of information that we need to digest to try to figure out how to attack this upcoming Sunday slate. But without further ado, let's start to jump in here with the Slate Outlook. For week 4 here, we have 13 games, a typical slate of games. Whether you play DraftKings or FanDuel, it is the same there. But it's overall, like I just kind of mentioned, it's a difficult slate. It's a difficult week to navigate. A lot of different things going on here. First and foremost, once we get to the Vegas totals, you're going to see we have some extremely, extremely high totals, whether that's game totals or team totals. We have that coupled with some extremely low totals. So you kind of have, two different extremes here that we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to pick and choose which players from each that we want to go to. What that typically lends to is some high ownership. You can really figure out where the ownership is going to go because of those extremely high totals that stand out. And then you're probably going to have some low ownership from players from those lower tier or lower Vegas total games and implied team total. So we'll try to use that to our advantage. We'll talk about all that as we go through players. But overall, that's one aspect of this week that is making it a little bit more difficult. Another point of difficulty here is that we are dealing with a significant amount of injuries, something we want to watch going into tomorrow. There's a lot of game time decisions, a lot of questionable players. You're seeing players like Dalvin Cook, who has practiced this week on a limited basis. He was questionable going into week 3. He obviously didn't play. He didn't actually practice going into week 3. Now we're into week 4. He is a limited participant, I think, all of this week. So my guess is he's going to play, but that's just one example of what you're going to want to watch going into tomorrow's games. In addition to that, I think you're going to see players like, or you already do know players like Derrick Henry are going to get a ton of ownership, mainly because both Julio Jones and A.J. Brown are out for the Titans. So that passing game for the Titans has taken a major hit. They are on the road here. I believe they're on the road with the Jets. But again, I want to point out that there are a number of injuries going into week 4 here. It's going to lead to a lot of ownership going to certain players like Derrick Henry. Do we want to pivot that? We're going to have to talk about that. But in addition to that, it's obviously going to affect who you can choose from in terms of players. Finally, the third point that makes this a little bit more of a difficult week is we have some legitimate weather concerns. You're seeing rain showers in Chicago, Buffalo, and Green Bay, or at least what's calling for rain. And you have some wind in those games. They're all outdoor games. Something you want to watch. Again, a lot of things you want to consider on a week-to-week basis. But for this particular week, weather, injury, and the totals for these games and how extreme they are is something that's going to play into all of our decisions here as we navigate this particular slate. Overall, what I'm seeing as I'm starting to build my lineups in consideration of what I'm going to talk to you guys about is I'm sort of paying up at the quarterback position. Overall, that's leading me to pay for more expensive stacks. You'll see how that plays out. And then you're going to have to try to find value at the running back and wide receiver position. Now, that's not new, but it is a very difficult slate for me in terms of me paying up for the quarterback position, paying up for stacks, to then pay up for all running backs or pay up for most of the wide receivers. I'm trying to find some extreme value in those two positions, possibly even the tight end position. as we navigate this particular slate and try to fill out our lineups. So without further ado, let's jump into the Vegas totals. Let's look at what we're seeing in terms of those extremes from high and low. So you can see here, there's several games. You're talking the game between Kansas City and Philadelphia being the highest at 54.5. We have several games above a 50 overall total. That includes the game I just mentioned, Carolina at Dallas, Cleveland at Minnesota at 51. You're seeing Arizona at the Rams at 54.5. And you're also seeing Seattle at San Francisco at 52. So far this season, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the most, by far the most amount of games with totals over 50. In addition to all of that, you're seeing some really high totals. Kansas City over 30 is an implied team total. Dallas at 27.5, Cleveland at 27, San Francisco at 27. The Rams are pushing 30, Buffalo's over 30. So a lot of really high implied team totals. You're going to want to focus there in terms of stacks. You're going to want to focus on offensive players from those games. But then, as I mentioned, there's a really drastic difference between some of these other games. Games like Detroit at Chicago at 41.5. You have a 42 total between the Giants and the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. Plus, you're seeing Detroit at 19.5. You're seeing the New York Jets at only 18.8 as an implied team total. The Giants under 18 at 17.3. The Steelers at 19.5. Houston is at 15.8. That is really low. If you don't follow this, if you don't put a lot of time into Vegas, you really should from this point forward. I talked about how it can be a little off early in the season. Usually takes a few weeks. 4, 5, and 6 is seemingly when they start to figure it out from being more predictable from a Vegas point of view. But those are some really, really low totals. So, as I mentioned, some really high totals and some really low totals. One thing to note from that is you're going to see some ownership typically flow towards those high total games, high total teams, and you're going to find some value, find some players that are going to be unowned in those low tier or lower scoring projected teams. So we won't spend any more time here, but take a screenshot, pause the video, whatever you need to do. Make sure you pay attention to this and make sure you're not choosing too many players from those really, really low total teams. So let's jump into the meat of this video, starting with the quarterback position. I mentioned I am going to be paying up at this position, so let's just start with the guy of all guys. That's Patrick Mahomes. $8,100 on DraftKings, $8,700 on FanDuel. Obviously a pricey, expensive tag there salary for him. In addition to that, his stacks overall with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, we'll talk about that, but in general, that leads to just an extremely, extremely expensive stack. But I do believe this is the week to go with Patrick Mahomes. The Kansas City Chiefs have obviously struggled over the last couple of weeks. They're 1-2. I think they turn it around here. They've got a foot up their butt and they're ready to go, in my opinion. They had a little bit of a health scare with Andy Reid too, so maybe they're a little bit motivated from that front to get him a win here. They are traveling to Philadelphia. 54.5 over-under in this game. I mentioned that is the highest on this particular slate. Big favorites at -7, but that really doesn't matter for the Chiefs, especially on the road. Last week, they finally got a little bit of a run game going, but overall, this team, whether or not they score 5,000 points or score 3 touchdowns, it doesn't matter. It's typically through the air. They pass the ball a lot. They're a high-volume pass team. Everything runs through Mahomes. But I digress. 30.8 is the implied team total for this team. Really, really good total, just under Buffalo, number 2 overall for the week. And something I added to these slides or to this video in particular is the projection. So I use Daily Fantasy Nerd. I talk about it a lot. Feel free to check the link down below if you guys haven't signed up for that. You can actually sign up for it, not pay, and you can actually look at the value plays. It doesn't give you the numbers, but you can sort and go through stuff and generate one lineup per day. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. But in general, I'll give you some of the numbers here for Daily Fantasy Nerd. Their projections are 29.2 points for Patrick Mahomes on DraftKings. That's 24.6 over on FanDuel. Obviously, less bonus, less points to be had on FanDuel overall. But guy's going to score a lot of points. We predict that both on Fantasy Nerd and just generally, right? Getting into some of the more specifics here, it's a tough, he's coming off, the Kansas City Chiefs are coming off a tough Week 3 home divisional loss to the Chargers. That's what I mean. I think they're going to be a little bit motivated here. You don't really need an explanation as to why you should play Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, an elite quarterback, the best, if not one of the best in the NFL right now, if not all time. But the guy is just great, right? Heavy pass volume, I talked about that a little bit already. It's a 63, basically 65-45 ratio in terms of pass to run. So they do throw the ball, way more than they actually run the ball. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not been very good this season. Really hasn't been good since they've taken him in the first round. Patrick Mahomes, even though they had the run game established last week, I talked about this, he still threw the ball a lot. He still had 3 passing touchdowns. He's had 3 passing touchdowns in each game this season. So you really know what the floor is with him. Even though he doesn't run the ball a lot, he does run the ball from time to time, but you're getting still a floor through the air with him. It's a very concentrated target share. When you're talking about stacks, you want that, right? Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce probably, I can't remember off the top of my head, account for more than 50% of the target shares for the Chiefs there. So you definitely want to go there with your stacks, and it's predictable, and that's what we want. Now, in terms of the opponent, Philadelphia on a short week here. They played Monday night versus the Dallas Cowboys. Tough loss there. But in general, just a short week. You want to attack teams or defenses that don't have much time to prep, especially for a team like the Chiefs, or much time to rest in general. Philadelphia's defense overall is mediocre. The ranks, the grades, Pro Football Focus, DVOA, all of that is kind of just middle of the pack. Doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense is absolutely elite, especially when they get their right going. There is a pass advantage for an O-line, D-line at plus 20%. So you shouldn't see too much pressure on Patrick Mahomes. That has been kind of the kryptonite. You saw that Tampa Bay team in the Super Bowl just really get after Patrick Mahomes. He was hobbled a little bit. You've seen other teams do it. When they lose, they typically are getting too much pressure up front. Hopefully this isn't a game where that happens. In fact, in terms of that O-line, D-line pass advantage, it's at plus 20%. So that does indicate to me that he should have some time. When Patrick Mahomes has time and Tyreek Hill have time to develop routes, it's just usually a nightmare for defenses, and that's what we're hoping for. Last thing I would mention about Philadelphia here, you saw Prescott last week, Monday night. If you watched that game, he didn't have crazy stats. He didn't break 300 yards or anything like that, but they basically just had their way with Philadelphia. He threw several touchdowns. I think he had 3 or more touchdowns, and not much pressure, as I mentioned, just kind of had their way and had a really easy performance versus that Philadelphia secondary. So that's what we want to target here, not a revenge, but a kind of a comeback, get-right game for the Chiefs. Kind of get back to 2-2, prove that they haven't really fallen apart, which obviously no one really believes that at this point. But I'm also interested on the other side of the field here, and that's Jalen Hurts. He is a savings here at $6,900 off of Patrick Mahomes on DraftKings, $79 on FanDuel. Much better play, in my opinion, on DraftKings, but I do like him on both sites. Same deal, right? Playing at home versus Kansas City. They are an underdog. I do really always like underdog quarterbacks playing at home. Little bit of a lower total at 23.8 for them specifically, but still really like this game, obviously. A lot of points to be scored. Daily Fantasy Nerd has his projection at 23.3 for DraftKings and 22.1. Now, the thing with him, we played him week 1. I believe it was week 1. We want to go to guys, running guys that put the ball, tuck the ball away and rush the ball at the quarterback position. Obviously, that's not Patrick Mahomes, but Jalen Hurts does give you that. And when you have that, you have a solid floor. You have predictability. You have a rushing floor that you can basically rely on and hope that you're not going to, throw a dud up there with your quarterback position. So Jalen Hurts is that guy. He's kind of a poor man's Russell Wilson right now. Obviously runs the ball a lot more. He's giving you 5 to 6 fantasy points every week just from rushing the football, and you'll take that, right? And at his price tag, that's exactly what we want in this particular game. I think he's going to have to run the ball a lot. They're going to have to try to stay competitive and keep up with this Chiefs high octane offensive performance that we do expect to come from them also. He has scored 21 fantasy points in every single game he has started. 21 or more in every game he started. And by that I mean go back to last season. I have an asterisk there. The only one that he didn't do that is that weird week 17 where the Eagles I clearly pulled him for obvious reasons that they wanted to lose that game. We won't go there. But in general, if you don't count that game and count the starts that he has made, he has scored 21 plus fantasy points in every game. You could argue that's his floor. We talked about the floor with rushing at 5 and 6 points. You're getting 21 plus basically overall out of him every week. So you love that, especially at his price tag. He's averaging 8 plus rushing attempts per game, 59 yards on the ground every single game accompanies that. So We talked about the points he garnishes from a floor perspective. Well, that's exactly where it comes from. Those 8+ rushing attempts a game, over 59 yards a game also. This includes red zone rushing. So not only is he running the ball, scrambling and running the ball, he's actually trying to get into the end zone and taking attempts towards the end zone as they're in the red zone. In terms of the defense he's facing, Kansas City's defense has been really, really bad this season. Really bad. I don't know exactly the finer details of what's causing this, but in general, that's what we want here. We're attacking this Kansas City team. They're allowing the second most fantasy points to the quarterback position. If you're talking about rushing quarterbacks, you saw Lamar Jackson rush for 100+ yards against them just a couple of weeks ago, come back and beat the Chiefs. Their secondary is ranked 21st overall by Pro Football Focus, and their pass rush, which is very important here, is ranked 30th overall from Pro Football Focus. They're not getting any pressure on the quarterback position. Quarterbacks are running against them when they have the legs to do so. They're giving up a ton of points to the position, and their secondary is not performing well enough to cover for any of what I just mentioned. So this is a great matchup. It's a cake matchup for quarterbacks right now, especially those like Jalen Hurts that do run the ball. Moving over to the running back position, I want to mention two guys specifically, David Montgomery and Najee Harris. Najee Harris, we're going back to the well here. We did play him in week 3, but let's start with David Montgomery. Trying to find a little bit of value here. The price tag on DraftKings is way better. By value, I mean considering the stacks and the quarterbacks I just mentioned can get expensive. But David Montgomery is a much better value on DraftKings is where I'm trying to go here. $5,800 there. Price tag at $7,500 on FanDuel is a little pricey, but nonetheless, I still like the spot for him. He's playing at home versus Detroit, 41.5 over/under. Chicago is a home, which is a little wild, a home favorite, even though they're coming off of arguably the worst offensive performance I have ever seen in my entire life. Arguably, maybe the last couple decades. I think you could probably go there. They were really, really bad versus Cleveland. Really bad with Justin Fields, and it doesn't matter. They were bad. Nonetheless, let's hope that they perform a little bit better here versus a weaker opponent in Detroit playing at home. -3 favorite, 22.5 implied team total. Not a great implied team total, but you're getting a running back here. He's got good usage. His time on the field, snap counts, all of that is where you want it. He's a favorite at home versus a team that can't really defend the run, and a decent implied team total. DraftKings projections, according to Daily Fantasy Nerd, are 15.7, 13.7 over on FanDuel. It was a concern early on with David Montgomery, especially in week 1. A little bit of week 2, but mostly week 1, that he was not getting his the role he saw last season, which was an elite back snap count, and he was not getting that in week 1. But week 2 and week 3, that snap count has increased. In fact, in week 3 here, you see 82% of snaps were played by David Montgomery. That was 4th overall among running backs in the NFL. So really good numbers there. That's what you want to see. You want to see that 80+% snap count. Those are your elite dogs. Those are guys not coming off the field on any particular down, and that's what we have here. We're basically reassured that with David Montgomery. I think you can expect lower ownership from him. You're going to see a ton of people go to Derrick Henry. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but you're going to see a ton of ownership go to specific players. I'm trying to find those that'll be a little bit lower owned. David Montgomery, I think, fits that bill here, especially at the price tags we're seeing. Good run advantage, plus 39%, O-line, D-line run advantage. So that offensive line should be able to get movement up front. Detroit is a really, really bad team, really bad defense versus the run, really bad defense overall this season. But in general, you can see the numbers here. It's Pro Football Focus each week publishes their strength of schedule that gets updated. This is the number 4 matchup for the running back position this week, so really good spot for David Montgomery. In addition to that, their defense is ranked 26th for a rush DVOA. The rush defense is graded 24th overall by Pro Football Focus, so basically garbage bottom tier type of defense versus the run. And then if you want an example, look at Green Bay, go back to San Francisco. Both of those teams, even with a backup running back in San Francisco, huge running back games versus this Detroit rush defense. So I do really like David Montgomery. I think this is his spot to kind of get right, come back to the David Montgomery that we expect. Moving over here to Najee Harris. Again, going back to the well, we played him. It was an excellent play last week, although the ownership was high. Again, talking DraftKings versus FanDuel, I think it's a little bit better of a play on DraftKings, especially considering his passing game usage. But the price tag on DraftKings, $6,800. It didn't really move up. I think it moved up $300 on DraftKings, which is not much. $300 or $500. FanDuel, though, saw a huge bump. He was in the $6,000 price range. Now he's at the $8,200. Makes sense. I mean, the guy's usage is astronomical, regardless of how bad the Steelers have been playing. Playing on the road here in Green Bay, 44.5 over-under. Pittsburgh is a pretty significant underdog at +6 and a really horrendous 19.5 implied team total. So why are we recommending Najee Harris? Well, it's because of his usage. It's not because he's a home running back favored in an elite matchup. It's other things, and I think you can go back to the well here. Projection for him on Daily Fantasy Nerd for DraftKings is 17.6, 14.6 on FanDuel. Again, really talking the usage here. No other running back is getting used like Najee Harris. It's insane. Both the rush and the pass are getting you 25, 30 plus actual opportunities. We're talking not just targets, but his actual rushing attempts and his catches are just astronomical right now. He leads the NFL, and he's actually led the NFL each and every week with 95+% of the snaps played. I think even one of the weeks he was 100%. The dude's just not coming off the field, which is exactly what you want out of your running back. It leads to more opportunities and more fantasy goodness. He leads NFL running backs also with 27 total targets. Now, obviously, a ridiculous 19 of those targets, an outrageous 19 of those targets came in week 3. Nonetheless, you're seeing some great things out of him. I think that's second most behind Alvin Kamara, who once had 20 targets just a few years ago. But second most since like the early 90s for targets for a running back. So that's exactly what you want, especially on DraftKings. If you want to break that down a little bit more, seeing almost a 21% target share for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this number's crazy, 43% of the team red zone targets. So you're getting really high quality targets in addition to just a mass quantity of targets. He's getting targeted in the red zone. He's also had 6 red zone rushing attempts. 6 red zone targets and 3 red zone rushing attempts. So 9 total on the season. He's getting basically 3 opportunities every single game in the red zone. What more do you want? You want this guy to score, and that's how you're going to get him to score. Green Bay's defense is not that great. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a lot of problems on offense, so we'll see how it plays out. But just to reassure that this isn't the worst play on the road as an underdog, Green Bay's defense is ranked 25th overall in terms of rushing DVOA. So it is a good matchup for a running back. Moving over to the wide receiver position here, I'm going to get a little crazy with the first pick here in Calvin Ridley. Tim Patrick probably also a little crazy, but that's where I think the value is. Let's start with Calvin Ridley. $7,000 on DraftKings, $72 on FanDuel. Not the cheapest price tag. His actual salary has actually remained the same, even though his performances haven't been great this season, which I think is going to lead to some really low ownership. But overall, this week, playing at home versus Washington, obviously in the dome with Matt Ryan, 47.5 over-under. Atlanta this has moved around a little bit. Atlanta now is a home underdog at +1.5 with a 23 implied team total. Daily Fantasy Nerd projects him at 17.4 DraftKings points, 13.6 FanDuel. This is a low ownership play. If you guys don't have the risk tolerance to do this, I completely understand. I primarily play GPPs, really large GPPs, and to me, Calvin Ridley stands out as an excellent GPP leverage play. You're basically pivoting off of some of the higher owned guys that you know will be there and finding a guy that has everything you want, right? An elite talent, has put up just crooked numbers in the past, gets most of it, if not all of his team's targets in particular weeks. Calvin Ridley's that guy. Now, he has not performed well, so it is a risky play. Washington has been known as a great defense, but they have not been good as a secondary this season. That's why I really like this play. You can see here when he's playing, he gets a healthy 24.8% of the team's targets. This is Calvin Ridley with an elite 33.3% of red zone targets. So again, you're getting a really low-owned elite player here with great target share for his team. He's also getting high-value targets, meaning targets around the end zone. That's what you want. You want him to score in addition to having, most of the targets for the team. Washington's defense is not that scary this season in terms of the pass and their secondary. Their defense is 28th overall in pass DVOA. Their secondary is graded out at 28th overall from Pro Football Focus. So both of those numbers kind of align there. And if you even go back to week 3, you saw the Buffalo Bills, You saw Josh Allen pass for 358 yards and 4 passing touchdowns versus that Washington defense. So again, great tournament, pivot play, but you have to have some risk tolerance here. You have to know what you're doing, right? If you're playing cash games, this isn't the play. This is purely a GPP style play, but I think it is an excellent one at that. I'm really excited to get some Calvin Ridley into my lineups this weekend. Now, trying to save some money here, I think you're going to go with Tim Patrick, or at least I am. $4,900 on DraftKings, $61 on FanDuel. Again, some drastic differences in pricing there. DraftKings is a much better value in my opinion, but he's playing at home versus Baltimore, 44 over under. Denver is a slight home underdog at +1 with a 22.3 implied team total. Projections for him stand at 17.4 on DraftKings, 13.6 on FanDuel. He provides value. That's the goal here. I talked to you guys about we're paying up for certain players, paying up for certain quarterbacks and stacks. We got to find some value. I think Tim Patrick makes sense, a lot of sense here for a good value play. It should be a close, competitive game. They're a home underdog versus the Ravens. Hopefully Lamar plays. It's looking like he will. Has had some back problems for the Ravens, but as long as he plays, this game should remain competitive. He's been this is Tim Patrick now, a huge beneficiary since Judy got injured, and now you saw Hamler go down for the Denver Broncos in Week 3. So there's even more targets opening up for some of those receivers like him and Sutton. In Week 3, his target share jumped to 21.7%. You want that number. 24% for Calvin Ridley is elite. Obviously, if you're getting a guy at $4,900 at 21.7%, you'll take that all day. Huge red zone target. I mean, physically, and his numbers are showing it. Dude's like 6'4" or something like that. Big dude. Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves, whatever you call him. He's targeting this guy, right? 27.3% of the red zone targets for the Denver Broncos are going towards Tim Patrick, again, because he's a physical monster in that red zone. He's a good weapon for the Denver Broncos. Now, in terms of the defense he's facing, Baltimore, similar to Washington, you have these teams in your head, these defenses as elite teams, and they're just not playing up to that par right now. In fact, they're playing really bad. Baltimore's defense, DVOA pass defense, 21st in the NFL. Really bad number there. Baltimore's secondary graded 27th by Pro Football Focus, and they've allowed the 3rd most passing yards in the NFL so far this season. So great matchup in my opinion for the Denver Broncos passing game. Hopefully, again, it stays competitive. Tim Patrick gets to eat a little bit here, gets a little bit of that target share to go up with some of these injuries. I do like Tim Patrick as a value wide receiver play. I'm going to give out 2 tight ends here that I think are more in that mid to low tier in terms of salary, hopefully provide some value at their current salaries, and that's Logan Thomas and Mike Gesicki. I really don't have a lot to add here. Tight end's always a tough position. So Logan Thomas is under $5K on DraftKings at $4,900, $5,800 on FanDuel, playing on the road in Atlanta. I talked about Calvin Ridley. I'm coming back here with some Logan Thomas. 47.5 over under. Washington is a slight road favorite at -1.5 with a 24.5 implied team total. Really, this is just a manageable salary for a tight end. His 15.7% of the team's target share is a good number for a tight end in my opinion. But the number that stands out for me is this guy gets targeted a lot in the red zone. 37.5% of their team's red zone targets are going Logan Thomas's way. Now, obviously, Washington is playing with a backup quarterback, but Heineke, if that's how you pronounce it, is playing really well and clearly likes to throw the ball to Logan Thomas. And for a value play, that's what we want. He's not going to set the world on fire, and if he does, more the merrier. But I still think it's at his price tag, this is a good play in my opinion, a good value play. Now, we have seen Logan Thomas put up some crazy numbers. He's put up several games in his history, dating back to last year really, with 20-plus fantasy points. So we know that upside is there in the right circumstances, and this could be the spot. Atlanta does struggle versus tight ends, and that's really the key point with Logan Thomas here. They lead the NFL in total red zone targets to tight ends, and that's 7. They have 5 red zone receptions off of that, also leading the NFL, and they've given up 3 red zone touchdowns, or 3 touchdowns, I should say, to tight ends, and that leads the NFL. So basically one of the worst teams at defending the tight end, at least right now, especially in the red zone. That's what we want. You got a tight end here that gets targeted a lot in the red zone versus a team that gives up a lot of red zone points, fantasy points at tight ends. You know, let's put them together. Let's make some magic happen with Logan Thomas this week. I also like Mike Gesicki. Now, he's been tough. His target share has gone down since the start of this season. He hasn't really panned out in the tight end that we've seen in the past with Tua, but now with Brissett, things are starting to change a little bit. 4K on DraftKings, 54 on FanDuel, so you're coming down a little bit in price tag here, playing at home versus Indy, 42.5. Crazy that Miami is a favorite here. Indy has just struggled, but they're at -2.5, 22 implied team total. A little bit of a revenge game for Brissett. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. Who cares? It's Mike Gesicki. That's who we're trying to target. Value salary, right? Extremely low ownership. I bet this guy is like 1 or 2% owned. So if you're looking for a value tight end that's not going to be owned, I think it is Gesicki here. Excuse me. He has a 17.9% target share on the season. That's not great. It's better than Logan Thomas, but it's not the greatest number in the world. But that number, what I want to talk about, has gone up. With Brissett, Jacoby under center, it's bounced. It's bounced up to 24+% in week 3. So that's what we want to see. And what you saw was in week 3, him get 12 targets. I believe they went to overtime, so it's a little skewed. I mean, we don't need 12 targets. We'll take that all day. But if we're seeing this guy get 5, 6, 7, 8 targets from a new quarterback, that's what we want to target here. And again, another guy that we've seen that 20-point fantasy point upside in past games is Mike Gesicki. So I do like this as another value play. 2 tight ends that I think you can go to if you're not stacking your Kelce's with your Mahomes, looking at your Kittles. All those guys are great plays, obviously week in and week out, but we do have to find some value. I want to be realistic with you guys, and these are 2 tight ends where I think you can do that. So let's bump over to stacks here and wrap up this video talking about the 2 quarterbacks we recommended. That's Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, both playing in the same game here. Patrick Mahomes, you're going to stack with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Don't ask any other questions. Just choose those guys. Don't be stupid. Don't try to get cute. Those are the guys you want to stack with Patrick Mahomes. I like stacking both of them. It's going to get really expensive. You're going to have to find ways to find value throughout your lineup if you're going to go with that particular stack. But I do obviously like Patrick Mahomes this week. He's my favorite quarterback, and those are the guys you have to pair with him. Don't go to Hardman. At least I'm not going to Hardman. I don't think any other guys really matter with Patrick Mahomes other than Hill and Kelce. Now, you want to come back. The traditional thing to do, I shouldn't say traditional, the thing you want to do is stack your players with your quarterback, your wide receivers or your tight ends, and then come back with another player, which makes absolute sense this week because we love the other side of the ball, and that's the Eagles. Now, where I think I get a little bit different here, I wouldn't say from the groupings of others, but I don't just come back with the guys I was stacking with Hurts. And by that I mean I love Miles Sanders this week. I love Jalen Hurts, but I also like Miles Sanders. The Chiefs struggle versus both the run and the pass this season. I think they're 32nd overall. Worst in football, but versus both the rush and the pass. So you like both. Hopefully, Miles Sanders gets more than 2 carries. You would hope so at home this week. We'll see. But he's my number 1 comeback player because of his price tag on the Patrick Mahomes stack. Now, obviously, you could go with Smith, you can go with Reagor. Those are the guys you're going to be stacking with Hurts. We'll talk about that in a second. But Miles Sanders is my favorite comeback player for that Mahomes stack. Going over to Jalen Hurts. We're not going to stack Miles Sanders with Jalen Hurts. That just doesn't make sense, at least right now. So the guys we are looking to stack with him are Devontae Smith, and Jalen Reagor. I do like Goddard, and I do like Ertz. It's a little bit of a toss-up there. Both those guys have like a 10-11% target share. They kind of eat into each other, which kind of sucks. But number 1 is Smith, number 2 is Reagor, and then you could kind of choose between those 2. And then obviously come back with some Chiefs. Go with Hill, go with Kelce. If you want to go with CEH, I don't really like it, but you probably can. It's going to be a really low-owned, risky play to go with him. But he obviously did run better last week. They do want to try to reestablish the run. They really got away from it. I'm going to count on them not doing it because I like Mahomes a lot. But in general, those 3 guys are who you're going to come back against that Jalen Hurts stack with. Some other highlights, some other recommendations I want to quickly point out. It's a tough week, as I mentioned, difficult week overall. So I'll give you a couple other quarterbacks I'm interested in. Matthew Stafford, obviously. If Henderson is out again, I love Matthew Stafford. But as of right now, it's looking like Henderson will play, the running back for them. I do have some interest in Henderson at running back, but it's a tough spot, again, with these questionable players. Lamar Jackson, have the asterisk there. He's hurt his back. We'll see what happens. I like Lamar Jackson. I was going to recommend Lamar Jackson over Hurts, but obviously Lamar didn't practice much this week, if at all. Hurt his back. I don't know how much he's going to be running the ball. I just wanted to mention him here quickly for you guys. Jimmy Garoppolo is a really sneaky, weird play. San Francisco. at some point, this guy's going to have a great game. This could be the week. It's a really good matchup. Sam Darnold, also really like him this week for Carolina. Obviously, without McCaffrey, it's not looking good for their running game. We'll see how Hubbard plays. But the connection between Darnold and DJ Moore is excellent. It's outrageous right now, and I think it's a great connection. It's a great stack. I think Darnold is turning the corner in terms of his career. It's a really good spot for him in Carolina, so we'll see how that unfolds. I am a little bit interested in Darnold and Garoppolo with some kind of off the beaten path plays here. Quarterback. Obviously, Derrick Henry. I mean, both the wide receivers are out. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones for Tennessee. I don't know how much I'm going to play Henry. His ownership's going to be outrageous, especially on FanDuel where he makes a lot more sense. But just so you guys know, he's in an excellent spot versus the Jets, who are horrendous, right? But he's on the road, and if you really want to just pivot him, I don't see a reason. I see a reason in playing him, obviously, but man, it's so unbelievably chalky. Derrick Henry in a good spot. Don't say I didn't tell you about it. Miles Sanders, I talked about him briefly. I do really like Miles Sanders if you're not playing Jalen Hurts. I think he's in a good spot versus that Chiefs at home. Obviously, they got to get the ball to him more. 2 rushing attempts versus Dallas was horrendous. Dalvin Cook, Darrell Henderson, both in red here. Good plays, but both of those guys are questionable going into the week. I like Zach Moss as a really cheap running back option. I think he's going to emerge as the better play of him and Singletary. Buffalo is a massive favorite this weekend, in a great spot for the running backs to really excel. So I do like Zach Moss. Some other guys, wide receivers, Brandon Cooks. I would recommend him. He, in fact, was one of my recommendations early on, but the weather in that game was pretty bad. But Brandon Cooks with Mills it's like a 45% target rate or something crazy with Mills under center. So Brandon Cooks, just keep riding that hot hand. Just watch out for that weather. Cooper Kupp, same deal, man. I mean, he's just... I shouldn't need to explain to you why to play Cooper Kupp. His numbers are crazy. His target share is crazy. Eventually, that should come down. But for now, him and Matthew Stafford are studying the playbook every morning or whatever they're doing. And he is just feeding that guy the ball, and it's working. Stephon Diggs is probably my most favorite expensive receiver on the week. I love the spot he's in. I do like Zach Moss. I talked about that. It's tough for me to go to Josh Allen. He's expensive. They're such big favorites. But Diggs is in just an elite spot. Justin Jefferson, you saw week 1 what a great receiver and a good quarterback, well, great quarterback in Mahomes can do to that Cleveland secondary. Tyreek Hill just was like dancing out there, wide open. I'm sure Justin Jefferson will have a good day versus Cleveland. DJ Moore, I talked about him briefly. Really like him even without Darnold as a stack. Deebo Samuel, talked about Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, Deebo Samuel is having an outstanding year for San Francisco. I really like his play. Allen Robinson, going to bench him in season longs. I'm probably not going to get a lot of ownership, but he's in an elite spot this weekend also. I don't know if it's Fields or if Andy Dalton's back, but they've been pretty bad with trying to get Allen the ball here. So I don't necessarily recommend him in anything but some crazy GPP plays. But he is in a great spot this weekend. And then George Kittle. If I'm not playing Kelsey and I can afford an expensive tight end, I'm going to play George Kittle because, well, it's George Kittle. So a lot of video there, a lot of talk. Hopefully you guys find that useful. I talked about the daily fantasy nerd projections. It's getting about time where this optimizer becomes really hot, really good. It's how I set so many lineups. It's my number one tool, really, even putting these videos together. So check down in the description. I mentioned it quickly. You can sign up for Daily Fantasy Nerd and not actually pay to see the numbers and still utilize it a little bit. At least you can see what it's like. I do highly recommend it. If you guys do sign up for it and do actually pay for a membership, it's monthly memberships. It does help this channel. It's the only way I generate any type of revenue on this particular channel. So if you guys want to help support the channel, it's I wouldn't say it's a cheap way to do so, but it is a way you can do that. I get a little bit of a kickback. With all of that said, thank you guys again for tuning in here. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you get a notification when I do publish these weekly videos. We've been pretty hot so far this season. Didn't have a video last week. I was on vacation, but we are back to the videos here, the detailed videos. Again, please make sure you like these videos if you find them helpful, and make sure you are subscribed. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Good luck this weekend, and hopefully we take down some tournaments. Talk to y'all soon.